so there were 2 boys, 2 girls, mom and dad, and by that time Grandpa had died, so his grandma was still living there, and and so it was still a Chinese fire drill in the morning.
Yeah, it's kind of a
Dad,
zoo, huh?
Dad would be at the sink shaving, and my brother and I'd take turns in front of him, and we'd be brushing our teeth and getting ready for school. My sisters might be sitting on the can, and it was an inside toilet, so that was good. But anyway, we lived there for my mother died in let's see, 1906, about 1997 or 98. So we had the house for a good long while. Dad bought it in the 30s for, I think he paid $37,500 for it, $3,750, and we sold it. When Mother died, we sold it for $98,000. So, which was a good buy in those days for somebody that wanted it. But it'd been around, but it was a great old place. It had room for a garden in the back, and he did a beautiful garden every spring. He raised everything. He raised from rhubarb to spinach and carrots and beets and beans, corn, potatoes.
Was that common for the neighborhood, for anybody to have a garden like
A lot of people. It was a small town. It was in those days probably 25,000 would be the population.
What was the neighborhood in the town like?
It was just a small town, and it was kind of a mill town, sawmill. Because we had about 7 or 8 sawmills not too far from where we lived, and logging trucks going and coming, and it was standard. But it was. We had enough room on the side of the house where we used to play football. We played football in the rain, marbles in the rain. If you'd had to do that or stay inside. So, in fact, every evening in the wintertime, when it was raining, my mother would meet my brother and I at the back. She'd call us for times to come in, and so she'd meet us at the back door. And she had clean clothes laid out for us, and she wouldn't let us in the house with the clothes because we were sopping wet and muddy. But the strange thing about it, we rarely had colds. We were used to it, and we dried off and warmed up. Once we got in the house, and the house was heated by a big old wood burning, actually sawdust and wood burning furnace in the basement. And it was tight. The house was tight, so it was nice and warm. We had a lot of fun in that house.
Smell. So, gosh, it's interesting. So, did a lot of people in the town? I'm guessing a lot of the people in the town worked at the sawmills.
The biggest industry in Oregon when I was a kid was the logging industry. And of course, that meant a lot of sawmill. Plywood was just coming into its own. They had rough building panels, but and composition and stuff. But mostly it was sawmills sawing dimension lumber.
Okay.
And there was a lot of agriculture. Was probably the second one. Willamette Valley, which was one of the richest farm areas in the northwest Willamette Valley, and they grew everything. One year they'd grow beans, the next year they'd grow wheat, the next couple of years they'd grow ryegrass, and that this is alternated the crops, and so it was agriculture and lumber was the main industries. University of Oregon was in that town, which later has become quite an institution. It was a pretty big school even then, but and the town Eugene is the county seat for the biggest county in area in the state of Oregon. So it was a pretty good sized village. Today it's runs about, I think it's about 650,000 people, but so it's grown an awful lot.
Your parents had your sisters. There's two. Were they? Do you have memories before them? Before your sisters?
Well, I'll tell you, the earliest memory I have, particularly of that house, and as I say, I was probably around 2 years old. And the reason I remember it as much as anything else is because it was a story that was told time and time again when over the years, when the family get together. The place that we moved from to that house was only a block away from. It was on Jackson Street, and it was just one block. And Dad moved most of the stuff with the help of his brother-in-law and a couple of my uncles. But they had a few things just left to pack, bring up clothes. So we walked as a family. We walked up the alley because our property went from the street clear back to the alley, and I forget what that was, about 180 feet, I think. But anyway, we were walking down the alley, and I remember going through the gate into the backyard, and I went up the back steps, walked through the house, went out the front door, walked out to 11th Street, which was a pretty busy thoroughfare, pulled out my toy and peed in the street. So, I remember that, and I remember my mother coming out horrified, and she came out and grabbed me and marched me in the house and immediately showed me where the bathroom was, and that's where I was to go to the bathroom.
So you guys they had been busy moving, and you'd probably been spending all this time at the new house, and nobody showed you where the bathroom
was. Well, actually,
was.
I hadn't. They did all that. The kid, this was the first time I'd seen the place. I'd never been there before.
Yeah.
But so that's why basically. I guess I don't know. I was so young. I don't know what got into me. I'd been potty trained, so I knew what we had a bathroom where we lived before. But anyhow, that was my first memory. So we had my oldest sister was it was my brother, then I, then my sister Joy, and then my sister Jerry. Jerry was the baby of the family, and Joy was, I think she was probably 3.5 years younger than I was. So my brother and I had the run of the house for about 3.5 to 4 years, and then Joy was born.
You remember like around the time that they were brought home?
Yeah. I remember the day Joy was brought home clearly as hell, because I was scared to death of her.
Really?
She was real red.
Yeah.
To me, she was. You see a lot of red babies, and she's all wrinkled and everything.
Sometimes they're even like purple.
Huh?
Sometimes they're like purple, you
Well,
know? They
yeah,
have a
they're-
weird color. They have a weird color.
Yeah, sometimes they do, yeah. But I remember that, and then, of course, they were enough younger than we were that when we went in the Navy, and my both brother and I were both gone, so we missed a lot of their growing ups. You know, they were much younger, and my little sister particularly. But we had a great life there. We lived there until like I say, until I went in the Navy. And then Joyce and I lived in that house with Mom and Dad. And if you think it was tough before, my brother had gotten home earlier than I had. Gotten out of the Navy, gotten home. He had also gotten married in the Navy. So he was married, and he and his wife, Beverly was her name. They were living there. We had no place to live. I mean, we got out of the service, we came home, and of course the folks didn't have any idea that we were going to pick up a couple of daughters-in-law along the way, but we did, and then so Joyce and I lived there, and we lived with the folks for till after Janet and Janice were born.
With your brother and Beverly?
Well, my brother and Bev, they moved out. They moved out before, quite a bit before I did, but while we were all there, that was 8 people in that house. And of course, they were all, other than my two sisters, we were adults. I mean, you know, married people, and that was really something. Was that one bathroom?
With the one bathroom.
But my dad started getting up an hour earlier so he could get out of that bathroom. But it was just the way of life, and we, you work around it, and everything was copacetic. But we had a lot of fun there. When we got old enough, we got up into junior high school, and we learned to dance, and both Keith and I loved to dance. My oldest sister, Joy, she was a great dancer. We used to dance, and
Do you remember your first dance?
Yeah, I remember the first dance. The first dance I had a date was the graduation from junior high school, and this is awful, but I was not very experienced with the female creatures, and I kind of had a crush on this little gal. Her name was Frances Nichols, and I asked her to go to the prom with me. Long story short, I chickened out at the last minute, and I stood her up.
So you didn't show up to the dance?
She didn't get to go to the graduation. And later on, many years later, after Joyce and I were married, we went to one of my high school reunions. There you go. And Frances was there. I hadn't seen her in probably 20 years. And she came up to me, and she had a funny grin on her face. And she says, "Hi, Norm, you don't remember me, do you?" And I looked at her and I said, "Refresh my memory." She says, "Frances Nichols." I got so embarrassed, I didn't know what to do. But I remember then. So anyway, she was a great sport about it, and she laughed and we had a good conversation, and